that? All right, yeah, now I got it. I like turtles. All right, so yeah, actually, I wanted to listen to the Mehdi Hasan video. Yeah, there it is. Okay. Actually, you know what? I'm going to upload this later. But yeah, here is the full video, or at least the audio portion of Mehdi. Let's see what Mehdi looks like.
Tonight on the Mehdi Hasan Show, a warning to us all, and it's not the first time I've said it, far from it, as the 14th Amendment case heads to the Supreme Court, the existential danger that Donald Trump poses to our democracy. Plus, pictures don't lie, the horrors in Gaza through the lens of now iconic Palestinian photographer Motaz Ezeiza. And finally, Republicans in control of the messaging war, why they're taking a victory lap over Harvard President Claudine Gay resigning. When will liberals learn to push back?
Yeah, really.
Good evening, I'm Mehdi Hasan. 3 years ago, I launched this show here on MSNBC with a very stark warning about the danger posed to American democracy by one Donald J. Trump. Tonight, on this very last edition of the Mehdi Hasan Show, yes, it is our last show, I want to begin by again warning you all about the threat to our democracy from Donald J. Trump. The Donald Trump who is running for president again, who is leading Joe Biden in some of the polls, and who continues to make violent, authoritarian, unconstitutional threats against his political opponents. The Donald Trump who 3 years ago yesterday incited a
Okay, so I downloaded this off of Mehdi's website, which is still up. I posted the link on Threads earlier. I saw a TikTok where somebody was complaining and saying that they're making Mehdi talk about this. I would assume it's Mehdi's final show. He's going to do whatever he wants. So if he wants to talk about Donald Trump, I have to assume he's going to talk about Donald Trump. It's probably a very important topic, especially if you're going on your way out, because it will be an extremely important topic for 2024. There's a lot that's going to happen in 2024, and that's definitely one of them.
An assault on the United States Capitol as part of a desperate but coordinated attempt to try and stay in office.
2 days ago.
And yet these days, according to a new Washington Post University of Maryland poll, the percentage of Americans who believe Trump bears a great deal or a good amount of responsibility for that January the 6th attack is at just 53%, down from 60% just 2 years ago. So the country's in trouble. There's no denying that. But let's start tonight not by going back 2 or 3 years, but by going back 156 years. Because as Steve Portnoy reported for ABC News recently, back in the spring of 1868, the United States Senate was debating the passage of the 14th Amendment. Specifically Section 3, which as many of you now know, says in part, no person shall be a senator or representative in Congress or elector of president and vice president or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or under any state who, having previously taken an oath as a member of Congress or as an officer of the United States to support the Constitution of the United States, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. And as Portnoy revealed, two key quotes emerged from that debate from the framers of Section 3. The first, from Republican Senator Peter Van Winkle, who said this is to go into our Constitution and to stand to govern future insurrection as well as the present. And I should like to have that point definitely understood. And the second quote from Republican Senator Lot Morrill, who responded to a colleague wondering whether the presidency and the vice presidency were excluded from Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, by making this very definitive closing statement. Quote, let me call the Senator's attention to the words, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States. Case closed. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment covers all insurrections, not just a civil war,
if you're watching
and covers all office holders, including the president and vice president. I mean, it would be crazy if it didn't. Look, the reason we're talking so much about the 14th Amendment these days is because last month the Colorado Supreme Court relied on the 14th Amendment to rule that Donald Trump should be excluded from that state's Republican primary ballot because he engaged in insurrection. And as the majority of justices on that court wrote, quote, President Trump asks us to hold that Section 3 disqualifies every oath-breaking insurrectionist except the most powerful one, and that it bars oath-breakers from virtually every office, both state and federal, except the highest one in the land. Both results are inconsistent with the plain language and history of Section 3. Now, on Friday, the United States Supreme Court announced that they would decide on whether the Colorado Supreme Court's decision stands. Will the justices on the nation's highest bench rely on that plain language and history of Section 3? Will the conservative justices, who make up the 6-3 majority and often cite originalism or reading the Constitution in line with what the framers originally intended?
I mean, we're going to know what's going to happen with the conservative court of the Supreme Court. It's going to go one
as their
way.
Guiding doctrine, will they drop originalism on this one case to help Trump? A bunch of conservative legal scholars and commentators, including Judge Michael Luttig, the New York Times' David French, and two conservative authors of the UPenn Law Review piece that kicked off this whole debate and who say Section 3 is self-executing, you don't need a criminal conviction for it, they all say this is an open and shut case. But of course, the Supreme Court isn't guided only by the Constitution, it's guided by politics and partisanship. And don't take my word for it. Take the word of Donald Trump's own lawyer, Alina Habba, on Fox this week.
I don't have video, I only have audio.
I think it should be a slam dunk in the Supreme Court. I have faith in them. You know, people like Kavanaugh, who the president fought for, who the president went through hell to get into place. He'll step up.
You're Justice Kavanaugh, and you had any self-respect.
What did, Trump pick, 3 of these guys, right? Amy Boney Carrot, Kavanaugh, and... who else was it? There was another guy. I forget which one it was.
Wouldn't you recuse yourself from this case right now? Shouldn't all Democrats be calling for Kavanaugh's recusal? Not to mention Clarence Thomas's recusal. Clarence Thomas, whose wife is accused of being involved in Trumpian efforts to overturn the last election. On Friday, President Joe Biden, who will likely face off against Trump this November, gave a speech slamming the former president and declared democracy as the central issue of the 2024 race.
Today, we're here to answer the most important of questions. Is democracy still America's sacred cause? That's what the 2024 election is all about.
Oh, this dude.
The choice is clear. Donald Trump's campaign is about him. He's willing to sacrifice our democracy.
Still, far too many Democrats don't seem to understand what's at stake. Yeah. When Maine's Democratic Secretary of State removed Trump from her state's presidential primary ballot last month,
the one thing that
she got attacked.
I do really like about this episode is that I think later on, Mehdi shits on fucking Democrats. He totally shits on Democrats. And the best part of this episode is that everybody is just eating this they're just like, oh my god, Mehdi's the best ever. And he's crapping all over him. He's crapping all over the same people.
By other Democrats,
nobody's listening
including
to
her state's independent Senator Angus King, who caucuses with the Dems. He said what a lot of centrist Democrats and independents have been saying in recent days. Quote, the decision as to whether or not Mr. Trump should again be considered for the presidency should rest with the people as expressed in free and fair elections. Sounds nice, but the fundamental problem with that argument is that the people did decide in 2020, 81 million to 74 million, and yet Trump didn't accept their decision. He tried to overturn that decision violently, and there is no reason to believe he will not do that again in November. That's why he shouldn't be on the ballot, and that's why the framers of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment came up with it in the first place, to deal with illiberal, anti-democratic threats like Trump. And yet, the same Republicans who obsess over the Second Amendment think the 14th Amendment is just optional. The same Supreme Court justices who obsess over the original intent of the framers are probably going to ignore that original intent next month and rule in favor of Donald Trump. And the same Donald Trump who incited an insurrection just 3 years ago could be either president again in a year's time or launch another insurrection. So it's safe to say America's crisis of democracy, sadly, is far from over.
Yeah, I heard somebody say, or not I saw somebody on Thread say, they should just do a preemptive insurrection with Joe Biden doing the insurrection instead. But it was an example of how ridiculous that sounds. And it sounds extremely ridiculous, but it's just, like we're getting to the point where nothing matters. There are no rules.
Here to discuss, Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. Thank you so much for coming on the show this evening. Secretary, you've been vocal in your calls for the Supreme Court to settle this matter swiftly. But how much faith do you actually have in this conservative court? You heard Trump's own lawyer calling on Justice Kavanaugh to, quote, step up. So is this all just a charade by a politicized pro-Trump court, or is there a reason to be hopeful?
Well, good evening. Thank you for having me on. And I really do think that what Trump's attorney said is a bigger reflection of him. Donald Trump wants people around him to be loyal to him and no one else, who cares about their duty. He acts like a mob boss trying to curry favors. And it just underlines how dangerous he is to our country. In regards to the Supreme Court, I do think it's important to take this final step. But ultimately, I'm not waiting on the Supreme Court to save democracy. I think the American people will do it again. Donald Trump is an extreme danger to this country. So are the extremist MAGA politicians who
I like how she says the American people will do it again.
Who are in some of the highest offices of this country. And Americans have continued to show up to stop this MAGA extremism, and I sure hope that happens again this year.
Of course, the problem is, even if Americans show up, and even if they vote for Biden again, and even if Biden wins the popular vote and the Electoral College vote, as he did in 2020, you still have these extremist MAGA Republicans, one of whom is Elise Stefanik, a member of House GOP leadership. Have a listen to what she said on Meet the Press today when asked if she would vote to confirm the next election results, certify them.
But just to be very clear, I don't hear you committed to certifying the election results. Will you only commit to certify the results if former President Trump wins? Does that mean that former President Trump wins?
No, it means if they are constitutional.
Isn't this the problem, though, that just turning up to vote doesn't work when you have all of these actors on the Republican side trying to basically rig an election in their favor?
It's a disingenuous, election.
Well, what we've seen in recent elections is the extremist agenda really backfire on them. You look at what conservatives have wanted for so long.
We're going to rely on the "you'll be sorry" strategy.
When it comes to the right to abortion care, and people really showing up to vote for pro-choice leaders in places that, frankly, have been really shocking to much of the nation. Like,
we're going to learn what happens when you dangle the carrot for so long, especially when the carrot was lost
Kansas
in the middle
or Ohio. It's not just that Congresswoman who's a danger to democracy. The second person in line to the presidency, the Speaker of the House, is an election denier. His lies, and people like him, lies have been used to really destabilize our elections. But with all that said, yes, I do have faith that the American people can right this train and save democracy. And I do have faith that the courts would intervene if a congressperson would try to stop the certification and the peaceful transfer of the presidency.
Back in June, Brazil's court blocked its former president, the very Trumpian Jair Bolsonaro, from running again for president until 2030 because he initially refused to accept defeat when he lost, and he made unfounded claims about that country's election system. What does it say about America that countries like Brazil are taking harsher action against election deniers and proto-insurrectionists than we have?
I can't comment on the internal laws and constitution of Brazil, but I think it highlights just the role that extremist leaders have taken across the world. And right here in the United States.
I mean, we saw what happened in Brazil with people trying to barge into this. I'm pretty sure it was an empty building at that point in time. And, overthrow things for Bolsonaro. It went worse than J6 because it was, I don't know how much of J6 was 60-year-old grandpas, but it didn't seem like it was a completely, it wasn't as much as it was in Brazil. So Brazil was a total shit show. That's why nothing happened there.
States, I strongly agree with the Colorado Supreme Court's decision. There have been two courts that have looked at the question of whether Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. They both said yes.
Yeah.
And just like the Colorado Supreme Court said, there should be no loophole in the Constitution for the president. So I'm hopeful that the United States Supreme Court will uphold Colorado's decision, but just like you, we'll see.
And the Colorado Supreme Court also cheekily included, I believe, a line from a Neil Gorsuch ruling from a few years back. So it'll be interesting to see what Gorsuch does with this. Last question to you. In the wake of this lawsuit, you've said that you've received a lot of death threats, so many that you stopped counting, which is horrible to hear, and I hope you're safe and well tonight. But it just reminds us all that this isn't about a one-time violent insurrection on January the 6th from Trump supporters. It's about a rolling insurrection, about rolling, ongoing violent threats against elected officials such as yourself.
That's right. And I think, there's a tendency to get really focused on the latest event. This lawsuit has caused violent threats against me, the Colorado Supreme Court, the Secretary of State of Maine. But to share with you, it did not start with this lawsuit. Violent threats and death threats against secretaries of state and election officials started in 2020. They have not stopped. They are very gendered. The majority of election officials are women, and they're looking to destabilize our democracy by intimidating people out of their jobs. I won't be intimidated, but we have to condemn the rhetoric of violence. And it's so despicable not to see high-ranking Republicans in Congress do that on a consistent basis, because their silence is complicity.
Totally.
Well said. Colorado Secretary of State Jennifer Griswold. We'll have to leave it there. We appreciate your bravery, and we hope you stay safe. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
In his remarks on Friday, President Biden recounted the hate and violence on display at the Capitol on January the 6th, sharing this particular anecdote.
One Capitol police officer called it a medieval battle. That same officer was called vile racist names. He said he was more afraid in the Capitol of the United States of America, in the chambers, than when he was fighting as a soldier in the war in Iraq. He said he was more afraid inside the halls of Congress than fighting in the war in Iraq.
The man to whom Biden was referring there is former United States Capitol Police Sergeant Aquilino Gonell. In his new book, American Shield, the Immigrant Sergeant Who Defended Democracy, Gonell shares what he witnessed that day at the Capitol and how it's impacted his life since. Sergeant Gonell joins me now. Thank you so much for joining me. Congratulations on the book, although I wish you didn't have to have written it and that hadn't happened to you. A recent poll found that just 18% of Republican voters believe that January the 6th rioters were, quote, mostly violent. Another poll found 66% of GOP voters support pardons for those who stormed the Capitol. And yet here's what you wrote in your book about your experience with that mob on 1/6. Quote, the back of my eyes went hot as I witnessed my fellow officers brazenly beaten with pipes, sticks, and rocks by rioters chanting "Fight for Trump" and "USA, USA." Trump banners outnumbered American flags, and for a second I froze in fear. I'd seen this kind of unbridled rage in Iraq when the base had been under attack, and I knew this was bad. Sergeant Gonell, you were out there with these insurrectionists. If you could sit down with Republican voters today, we've seen some pictures of some of the attacks on you. What would you say to these Republican voters to make them change their minds about what they think happened on January 6th?
Well, thank you for having me in your show, Hasan. And what I will say to them is I'll walk with them to where I was on January 6th. I'll show them the same videos and pictures that you are showing. But they don't have the courage to do that. And while I was there in the aftermath of January 6th, only Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger had the courage to meet up with me and find out exactly what happened to me, what I witnessed, what were my actions, and how I helped defend the Capitol on January 6th from Trump supporters. I often pass by some of the elected officials that deny what happened, and they look away or pretend to be doing something else. So like Lindsey Graham, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kevin McCarthy, and so forth. They don't have the courage to face or ask the officers what they went through. All they're doing is for election purposes and for power, discredit or make up stuff like the hostage things that Stephanie said this morning. I mean, are you serious? These are people who have been convicted in court of violent actions that they did, criminal actions and felonies.
When you hear Elise Stefanik, a member of House GOP leadership, talk about the people who attacked you and your former colleagues as hostages, what are you and your former colleagues who are still in the force, still protecting people like Stefanik? What do they make of that? You guys are protecting people who are protecting the people who attacked you.
So he's talking to one of the cops that was there in J6. And what he's talking about is how Stefanik went on Meet the Press, one of Mehdi Hasan's co-worker shows, this past Sunday morning. And basically, Meet the Press is just letting whoever wants to say whatever the fuck they want to say, just say it. And Stefanik's like, oh no, these are good people. Like, you know, J6 rioters were like, they were just doing a tour kind of shit. Like that's basically what she's saying. And so now he has the cops, or one of the cops that was there at J6 defending the Capitol.
Yeah. And that's insane. You know, as I described in my book, American Shield, on a couple of chapters, is a betrayal to the sacrifices that we did on January 6th. It's a sacrifice on the life in every effort that we did on January 6th.
These motherfuckers are the back the blue ones.
And the only reason why they escaped any harm, that none of them, all the elected officials, were not hurt, was because the actions that myself and my colleagues did on January 6th. You know, if they really think that those people are hostages, or political prisoners, or patriots, then what are we, the police officers? Who are we to them? You know, and this is coming from the party of law and order, quotation marks. I don't believe in policies anymore, because they don't believe that. A couple of weeks ago, Speaker Mike Johnson said in a press conference that there are the party of law and order, the rule of law, and transparency and accountability. And yet, in the same sentence, in the same breath of line that he was saying, he said, let's blur out the faces of the hostage, of the peaceful or innocent individuals. So the Department of Justice cannot identify, prosecute these rioters. It's insane the way they try and do it.
You're saying blur out the faces away what happened.
Insane indeed. Quick last question to you before we run out of time. I want to ask you about this case that's going to go before the Supreme Court, which will decide if Trump can remain on the 2024 ballot. Part of that is about whether what happened on January the 6th was an insurrection and whether Trump engaged in insurrection. You were there on the ground. I wonder, should the Supreme Court hear from people like you? What would you say to the Supreme Court if they asked you that question?
Call me up. I'll volunteer. I'll show up without them calling me if that's the case, but I'll volunteer. I will gladly give my testimony to what happened and provide them my testimony and my account of what happened, what I witnessed, how many people, more than 40 people assaulted me on January 6th. And that's why I'm very adamant about...
In your view, it was certainly an insurrection.
Yes, it was. And anyone who took part...
I saw that shit live, too. I saw Babbitt die on screen. That shit was wild.
Or orchestrated, should be held accountable.
Sergeant Aquilino Gonell, thank you so much for your time tonight. American Shield, the immigrant sergeant who defended democracy, is the book. We appreciate you taking time out tonight.
Thank you, Hasan, and I'm sorry that this is your last show. I appreciate your time.
We'll appreciate you being on it. Still to come, my conversation with Palestinian photojournalist Motaz Azaza, whose striking images documenting life in Gaza have struck a chord around the world. What is Israel's end goal in Gaza, where, according to local health officials, almost 23,000 people have been killed in just 3 months. Officially, say the Israeli government and our own Biden administration, the goal is to defeat Hamas, which killed 1,200 Israelis on October the 7th, to eradicate them from Gaza, even from the face of the earth, if that's even possible. But unofficially, Israeli ministers keep saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah, they do.
The aim of this operation is to clear Gaza of Gazans, what the Palestinians and a growing number of governments around the world are calling ethnic cleansing. Israel's finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said in an interview last week on Israeli army radio, quote, "If we act strategically, correctly, there will be immigration and we will live in the Gaza Strip. We will not allow a situation where 2 million people live there. If there are 100 to 200,000 Arabs in Gaza, all the talk about the day after will be different." And Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir said to reporters that the war presents, quote, "an opportunity to concentrate on encouraging the migration of the residents of Gaza." He called such a policy a correct, just, moral and humane solution. Now, the Biden administration has said it rejects such calls, and supporters of Israel say these two guys are not important. They're fringe figures. Though I'm not sure how fringe you can really consider the finance minister and the national security minister to be. Ethnic cleansing is, of course, a war crime. But Israel continues to deny that it's committing war crimes in Gaza, even as journalists on the ground continue to document what leading human rights groups and even UN rapporteurs have said could amount to war crimes. And those journalists themselves keep getting killed. At least 72 Palestinian journalists have lost their lives since
72.
October the 7th. 79 in total.
79.
More journalists killed in this conflict than in any conflict for over 3 decades.
Jesus.
Just today, Hamza al-Dahdu and Mustafa Thuraya, both journalists in Gaza, were killed in what local officials say was an Israeli airstrike on their car in southern Gaza. Hamza was the eldest son of Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief, Wael al-Dahdu, who has already lost his wife, 2 other children, and a grandson in this war, and has been injured himself from an Israeli airstrike.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. Without those brave Palestinian journalists on the ground, there will be no one to tell the rest of the world, to tell all of us about the ongoing horrific
And that is what they're trying to stop, right there.
impact of this war on the innocent people of Gaza.
That is exactly what is going on. They want to stop the press that is embedded with Palestinians from reporting what they're reporting, what they're showing to the world, really. Because it's very important. I don't think there's been another time or another occasion where this amount of people are so condensed that simply dropping bombs on particular homes or areas is resulting in the amount of deaths that we're seeing right now. And of course, if you're the people that are dropping the bombs, you don't want that to be reported. You don't want anybody to know about that. That's kind of the way that it's been historically, right? Is, you drop the bombs and then you tell the news what to say, because that is the group that you control, because you control the media as well, that is coming out of that area. Rarely has it been that those groups of media are not controlled. What we're seeing today is, rather than attempt to gain control, which seems to have escaped them for quite a while. Also, the game has changed as well, where you can no longer control every single media source that is there within your borders, because there's a lot of things going on. But you can't control the narrative, so you continue doing your genocidal acts, and then on top of that, your own force is kind of giving the game away as well on their end, because they think it's funny. They think it's fun to go and post these things on TikTok and wherever they're posting them, and they're blowing up schools and blowing up mosques and whatever in the background as they celebrate. It sounds like a good old time for the boys. it is not coming across well to the people that watch these videos. You know, and it is younger generations of Americans that are absorbing this information, and they're seeing it as it happens, but they're not seeing it from the perspective that is being fed to them. They're seeing it from the live perspective of the media that was intended from the IDF soldier to be shown to his own citizens. Rather than that going directly there, it is going out to everyone else, and everyone else around the world is seeing that, and they're saying this is disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting. There should be nobody on this planet that is behaving the way that these people are behaving. And I think that's where you're losing. You're losing with the arrogance.
Gaza. Earlier I spoke to photojournalist Motaz Azeza, who...
This is why we support Motaz. And if it's not Motaz that we're supporting, if he no longer exists, it'll be someone else that we're supporting. It will always be somebody else that we are supporting.
Has amassed more than 17 million followers on Instagram for his work documenting this conflict, and whose photo of a little Palestinian girl trapped under the rubble in Gaza was picked by Time magazine as one of its top 10 photos of 2023. Motaz, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I know how difficult it is for you to do interviews like this.
I think this is on YouTube. Let me look up Motaz Mehdi Hasan. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is on here. Yeah, here we go. I was trying to watch this earlier. I was working, so I couldn't watch it. But hey, let's watch it now.
Yes. From where I'm sitting, Motaz, it looks like there's almost a war on journalists in Gaza, a record number of journalists killed in this conflict so far. How hard is it for you as a photojournalist to just survive, to stay alive as you do what you do on a daily basis? You've lost colleagues, you've lost friends, as you mentioned. Thankfully, you're still standing, but how do you do it?
If the life was rolling by humans, believe me, I was going to be killed in the first day of war, but thank God for saving me till now. I was going to lose my life multiple times, but thank God again and again.
Okay, I feel like this interview is a little cut off from the full one, so I'm just going to play the full one.
We want to start with the tragic news out of Gaza today. The journalist Hamza Dahadou killed by an Israeli missile strike, the son of Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief Wael al-Dahadou, who was injured recently, lost multiple family members. Mustafa Turaya, another journalist, killed today in the...
And that's the other thing that they're losing, that the oppressive force is losing here, is that we see every single time that there is a death, that is broadcast. Whether you want it to be broadcast or not, it is. And that's where you're losing as well.
Israeli airstrike.
And it doesn't matter how much you oppress it. It doesn't matter what you do to try and change the narrative. We already know what's going on. It's been 3 months, man. It's been 3 months.
What is your reaction to that news? More and more journalists being killed. I believe you knew them well. You posted earlier today about a picture of you at Hamza's wedding last year.
Yeah, Hamza, he's my friend. And Mustafa also, he's my friend. And just I want to say that days before Hamza getting killed by the Israeli airstrike targeting their car, Hamza was always telling me about his missing to his mom, because he missed mom and the members of his family just a month ago by an Israeli strike to a house in the middle area in the strip. So it was shocking to me to just, I opened my eyes and I was preparing my things, trying to check news, what is happening around. There was a lot of heavy machine gun sounds around me, the area that I'm living in. It was all full with smoke, flames in the sky. and there was a lot of bombing. I just was flipping or checking the news, and suddenly I heard a friend of mine, a journalist who was with me in my house. He said, Hamza got killed. Believe me, I know that I witnessed a lot of massacres in the last years, in the last days, sorry. I lost a lot of friends, a lot of family members, but this was shocking to me, especially Mustafa. Also, Mustafa, he was the drone guy who was filming me with his drone. All the videos you saw before, it was by Mustafa drone. So Mustafa and Hamza, it was heartbreaking for us. It was a shock, and also especially when you can't even say goodbye for them because they were in Rafah. And
I'm sorry, I stopped listening for about a second. Did he say that somebody died while he was filming? Hold the hell on.
Lost a lot of friends, a lot of family members, but this was shocking to me, especially Mustafa. Also, Mustafa, he was the drone guy who was filming me with his drone. All the videos you saw before, it was by Mustafa drone. So Mustafa and Hamza, it was heartbreaking for us. It was a shock, and also especially when you can't even say goodbye for them because they were in Rafah, and it's a long way, crowded way,
and Motaz,
and it's so dangerous to go.
From where I'm sitting, Motaz, it looks like there's almost a war on journalists in Gaza, a record number of journalists killed in this conflict so far. How hard is it for you as a photojournalist to just survive, to stay alive as you do what you do on a daily basis? You've lost colleagues, you've lost friends, as you mentioned. Thankfully, you're still standing, but how do you do it?
If the life was rolling by humans, believe me, I was going to be killed in the first day of war, but thank God for saving me till now. I was going to lose my life multiple times, but thank God again and again. They don't want us to say the truth. They know that we show the realities of the terror of the state that they are doing, the Israeli terrorism, that they're killing journalists, killing Palestinians, killing innocent people.
Killing children.
They don't want us to show the truth.
Your picture of a young Palestinian girl trapped under the rubble, who thankfully, unlike thousands of other kids in Gaza, survived. Talk to us about this particular picture.
This picture, maybe as a photographer, let's say it's one of the strongest moments I captured during the war. It's for a girl that she was living in a 8-story building. The Israeli warplanes destroyed it, and she made it to survive. Nobody was like seeing her, but I was trying to with my camera to put my camera in the small holes that showing inside the building, the destroyed building. I was like using the low shutter speed so I can get more light to see, and I was like going here and there to see if someone's still alive, if someone is so close to above the rubble, so the civil defense and the people can get him out. So I was trying. So once I put my camera, I saw the light in her eyes. I saw and I heard her screaming. So I didn't capture the picture. I kept watching her till the civil defense opened and a hole in the front of her. So when the light came in her face, in her strapped body, injured body, I took the picture. She was deeply injured, but for me, for our situation, she was so lucky to survive, to made it. There was like 70% pass in the single Israeli strike on the building. So even if she deeply injured, she's lucky to made it, and she's lucky to be survived from this airstrike.
Motaz, last question to you. You have become in many ways a voice for the people of Gaza to the rest of the world. 17 million people come to your Instagram page to see images out of Gaza, raw, visceral, unfiltered, heartbreaking. What is your message to the people watching you tonight in America who don't follow you on Instagram, who aren't seeing those images? What do you want them to know about what is happening in Gaza that they don't know?
The first message is don't call yourself a free a free person, if you can't make changes, if you can't stop a genocide that is still ongoing since the first day. We are so close to be 100 days of murdering and genocide. So don't you call yourself a free person if you can't stop someone to kill someone else? Because what I witness here, that all the world is ruled by a people that no one in the whole world can say no to them, or they can't stop them. So nobody shall call himself a free person if he's watching another human being getting murdered in front of him, a live show by a young photographer who's just coming to show the world that and he can't stop this. People call Motaz.
My complete apologies about that. I was looking at something off screen. I need to be listening to Motaz.
Like a hero, a superhero. Motaz didn't choose this. Motaz didn't want this. But I don't want you to justify what is happening or to forget about what is happening by calling someone a superhero and forget the people who are under like tons of rubble and they died there by a missile. Maybe you shared with your taxes to give it to the occupation.
We will unfortunately have to leave it there. We're out of time. Motaz Azaiza, thank you so much for your time today. Please do stay safe.
Thank you, Mehdi.
Next, some key numbers you need to know 3 months into this horrific conflict in Gaza.
Absolutely real.
On October the 7th, 3 months ago, Hamas killed around 1,200 people in Israel, the worst attack in that country's history. In the 3 months since, Israel's airstrikes, ground invasion and blockade have made Gaza uninhabitable, to quote the UN's humanitarian chief. Israel blames the situation completely on Hamas, of course, but
of course, that's not the first time that they have made an area uninhabitable. So I post a lot on Threads, and I posted the interview with Norman Finkelstein, where he talks about the I think it was the 2006 war with Lebanon, where on their way out, the IDF on their way out of Lebanon, they just decided to sprinkle roughly like 4 million cluster mines all over the place, also making that uninhabitable. Not only did they do that, but also in the 80s they bombed the shit out of Lebanon and made that uninhabitable because they destroyed a lot of buildings as well. And so this is not the first time that they've done this. It is the same playbook.
Get a sense of just how dire the humanitarian situation inside of Gaza is. Give me 60 seconds to share some key numbers. Start the clock. The health authorities in Gaza, controlled by Hamas, say almost 23,000 people have been killed since October the 7th, and they say 70% of them are women and children. According to Save the Children, more kids were killed in Gaza in the first 3 weeks after October 7th than across conflict zones annually since 2019, according to the Associated Press. More civilians have been killed in Gaza in 3 months by Israel than the US-led coalition killed in Iraq and Syria in its 3-year bombing campaign against ISIS. According to the CPJ, Gaza is the deadliest ever conflict for journalists. According to the UN Secretary General, Gaza is the deadliest ever conflict for UN workers. According to UNRWA, 85% of Gaza's 2.3 million residents have been displaced from their homes. According to the World Food Programme, 4 out of 5 people on planet Earth who are in a famine or a catastrophic state of hunger right now are in Gaza. And in terms of physical destruction, a report in the Wall Street Journal found nearly 70% of Gaza's approximately 400,000 homes have been damaged or destroyed. Most of the strip's 36 hospitals have been shut down. Defense expert Robert Pate told the AP that the Allies in World War II destroyed around 10% of all buildings across Germany in the 3 years between 1942 and 1945, compared to over 33% of all buildings destroyed by Israel across Gaza in less than 3 months. According to Pate, quote, Gaza is one of the most intense civilian punishment campaigns in history.
Now, he says intense civilian punishment campaigns. That is all that this is. In the entire time they have been bombing 23,000 people, how many militant targets have they killed? So far, they've only said that it was like 2 or 3, I think. And even at that, now they're killing militant targets that are not even in Gaza. They're killing militant targets that are leaders of the Hamas group, but they're killing them in other countries. So you're telling me that the militants themselves are underground in tunnels, as they have specifically stated. You're telling me that the leaders, or some of the leaders, are in other countries, as they have already assassinated. But your targets are the people. Not even the people that fully support the IQB or their movement, or that have the ability or freedom to speak up against them. But these are literally 66% women and children. The average age in Gaza is 18 years old. Half of these people are children. Now, if you look beyond that and you think, okay, half of these people are children, what are the other half? The other half, 66% to that. Women. The rest, men. Are they all part of it? More than likely not. This is why nobody in their right mind is on the side of the IDF.
Coming up, how Republicans are great at taking up all the oxygen in America's culture wars. Case in point, the Claudine Gay debacle.
This is
But
exactly
first,
what I was
Richard
saying
Louis is here
earlier
with
today.
some other headlines. Good evening, Richard.
Thank you, Mehdi. Some breaking news first off for you from Capitol Hill. House and Senate leaders saying they have a government spending deal for the coming year. Again, national security priorities.
To be said about the allegations of play. Much to be said about GOP Congresswoman Elise Stefanik's cynical, dishonest questions around the meaning of intifada that set off this conflagration. Much to be said about the allegations of plagiarism subsequently levied at Gay. Much to be said about the vile racist rhetoric that exploded on social media throughout this saga. But not by me. Not tonight. No, instead, I want to zoom out. I want to talk about how this episode serves as yet another example of conservatives' uncanny, otherworldly ability to make a
My God, Mehdi, you're hitting the goddamn nail on the head here. Conservatives control the narrative every time.
Kilimanjaro out of a molehill. Because it's a talent that liberals and leftists don't appear to have the skill or inclination to mimic. You see, while Democrats pass the poll numbers and worship at the altar of kitchen table issues in election after election, year after year, Republicans, you may have noticed, talk about whatever they damn well please. And they can do so because Republicans don't follow the news. They don't.
Just whatever crazy shit Republicans want to talk about. They're like, oh my God, there's a trans girl doing things on the football. Like, they'll make that an issue. And then instead of saying, hey, stupid, shut the fuck up, like, that is not a real issue, let these people do what they want to do. Instead of saying that, the Democratic Party responds and says, oh, well, you know, it's not happening everywhere, so it's not a problem. Like, no! Tell them to shut the fuck up! Tell them it's not a fucking problem! Like, when you acknowledge that these stupid subjects that nobody should be really caring too much about, because it's happened for centuries, it's happened for millennia. Let people be who they are. That's it. That's all that matters. It doesn't need to be written into the law because there's one person in the state that is part of the track team that does whatever and it probably comes in 5th place. Like, it doesn't matter.
Don't just comment on the news, they make the news. They settle on a scandal du jour, and whether you like it or not, that becomes the discourse. It's at the top of every cable news show, on the front of every newspaper.
Exactly.
And I mean that literally. The New York Times, the grey lady, this nation's purported paper of record, slathered 5, count them, 5 Claudine Gay stories on its front page just this Wednesday alone. Now, in fairness to the Times, there's not much else going on. It's not like, there's a war in Gaza or...
That's exactly what I'm talking about. You let these people control the narrative. They talk about some dumb fucking hotel in Fort Worth that got blown up by their own stupid volition because they don't want to pass any fucking regulation laws or anything to regulate gas or gas lines, all these old fucking infrastructure that are in all of these buildings in Texas. And instead, you give them 30 minutes of that bullshit rather than talking about something that is more important, like 23,000 people dying, maybe the protests that are going on nationwide that is getting no attention. And it just blows my mind of how accepting we are of, oh yeah, maybe we should be talking about this over here. Like, you are giving zero attention to the issues that are happening worldwide. And you're concentrating on one little thing that, yeah, it is a problem, but you're not thinking of the grander scale of how this is all encompassed into one thing. That if you could keep these people that are over here causing this smaller problem busy with a much larger picture, you would be able to pass those laws. You would be able to get things accomplished. You would be able to keep them busy to where they can't continuously just ram every single law that they want to do down the throat of Texas or down the throat of Alabama or whatever state it is. Stop it.
Or a war in Ukraine or an out-and-out fascist poised to sweep the Iowa caucuses. Nothing going on. But I digress. This is hardly the first time the mainstream media has played patsy for far-right bad actors, but it may be the first time they did so, as said far-right bad actors were mid-Bond villain, mid-Sith Lord monologue, explicitly reveling in their grand plan to, quote, smuggle the plagiarism story into the media apparatus of the left, legitimizing the narrative to the center-left, and then squeeze. Again, my aim tonight is not to reconsider or re-prosecute the case of Claudine Gay. Others can and have been doing that endlessly. Right. No, the big story here, in my view, is that arch conservatives have gotten very, very good at setting the agenda, at working the refs, at hoodwinking the press and pundit class into obsessing over the ridiculous non-issues that they care about.
It is non-issues, and they control the narrative. Every single time there is a major narrative in the news, it is because Republicans made it a narrative.
Not most American.
Because if you don't keep them busy with real issues, they will do this type of stupid shit. We could have had codified abortion. It could have been in there. They could have been fighting that the entire time.
That they care about. And let me be clear, this is not meant to be an indictment of Republicans, far from it. If anything, it's a compliment to their political ninjutsu.
They love what they do and they do it well. And that is a problem because nobody's fighting against them.
And really, a condemnation of the liberals and leftists who have watched this being done to them for years and never attempted to try something similar themselves, let alone call it out. Think about it. The uproar over Claudine Gay follows the uproar over DEI, which followed CRT, which followed Bud Light, which followed the Green M&M, which followed Mr. Potato Head, which followed, heck, if you go back far enough, President Obama's tan suit. People talk an awful lot about the so-called liberal media. But if the media really is so lefty, so liberal, so pinko, why, pray tell, does so much of our media spend so much time obsessing over exactly what conservatives want them to?
Exactly. Why?
Coming up after the break, a final message from me. Do stick around, and the most memorable moments from this show over the past 3 years. You do not want to miss it. It's important what's coming up.
Okay, I don't know that. I'm going to miss that. I think he
to say there's an open border as Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, your leader, and others keep saying.
Oh, he did a recap. I don't know if I have the recap. Let me see. Mehdi Hasan. Recap. Okay. think they just posted it, so maybe it's on here. Oh yeah, here it is. Goodbye, Mehdi.
To close out the show tonight, our final show, sadly, we wanted to take a look back at some of our favorite moments from the past 3 years. Roll the tape.
Roll the tape.
Welcome to a new show here on MSNBC. I'm Mehdi Hasan, and this show is committed to standing up for democracy. Representative Dan Crenshaw from Texas's 2nd Congressional District joins me now. It's a lie to say there's an open border, as Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, your leader, and others keep saying there's an open border. That's false. If 72% of people are being...
Wish I could just, like, pop this motherfucker.
Deported. How is that an open border? That's just a lie.
Well, the vast majority of people are in these.
I meant the book. I would never in my life.
Family units that do not get deported. There's also at least 1,000 that just got off the phone with Border Patrol.
War crimes do not constitute and are not an appropriate response for other war crimes.
I'm united on not saving McCarthy.
I'm not saving McCarthy. No, that's it. He created this problem and he can find his way out.
Our country, its foundations are built on people coming here to find an opportunity to escape religious persecution.
Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Elizabeth Warren, Senator Schumer, Senator Whitehouse, Senator Van Hollen, Democratic Senator from Minnesota, Tina Smith, Miles Taylor, thank you for joining us on the show. You were Chief of Staff to Kirstjen Nielsen at the Department of Homeland Security during the child separation controversy. Would you like to apologize tonight to the parents and kids whose lives were permanently damaged by...
You know, that kind of stays with me, the AOC quote. Protestants came here to... Catholics came here to spread religion. Protestants came here to be able to practice their religion. So
family separation during that Trump first term.
We are at this moment on a road to hell. The world, in terms of climate and in terms of nuclear war possibilities, there should be, I think, a global emergency. But as Greta Thunberg keeps pointing out, it's just people are not rising to that challenge.
Greta Thunberg, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Imran Khan, thank you for coming on the show. Noam Chomsky, thank you as ever for your time. Appreciate it. We should thank black women for doing what a bunch of white guys have failed to do for years. Hold Donald Trump, hold a former president, accountable for his alleged criming. John Legend, thanks so much for joining me on the show tonight. Michael Moore, Judd Apatow, thank you so much for joining me. What was it like to be back on screen as Luke Skywalker? Well, kind of back on screen, aided by CGI in the TV series The Mandalorian on Disney Plus after all those years. I mean, I literally, like many, whooped out loud when you arrived in that fight scene in the season 2 finale.
I went over, they showed me the footage.
Okay, I haven't watched the show, but I still don't understand how a man can turn into a DeLorean.
And then they proposed this idea, which I was gobsmacked, as you British are fond of saying.
So it's a simple choice. It's either no to the ice cream or yes to apartheid. You choose.
This is the time where they will understand. Come on. It is past their bedtime, and so it's like 8:30. They're supposed to be
I've always been paranoid that my daughter would do that in my home studio. She hasn't, but you have. Yeah. You said to me that if France beats England, I have to eat a croissant. But I lost, so I eat the croissant over to you. There's no justice in the DC comics. Superman destroys innocent people.
Is it
in
not
that fight
called
with,
Justice
with
League?
Zod. How many buildings? Doesn't matter. Is it not called the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea? It doesn't make it democratic just because you give it a nice name. People sometimes say journalists shouldn't be biased. No, journalists.
Okay. No comment. No comment.
Should have a bias towards democracy. We should be proudly pro.
Oh God. Okay, maybe Mehdi was a little bit more liberal leaning back then. I would assume he was. You know what? I gotta go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. Let me do one thing here, I guess. There we go. I'll be right back. Oh, here we go. That's a better one. I've returned. Chill. So yeah, that was a oh wait, did I finish the Mehdi Hasan or not? Let me make sure I did. Goodbye, Squirtle. Oh no, I wasn't done. Alright, here we go.
Democracy, and proud to call ourselves Democrats. Small d Democrats.
What? Run that baby again.
Have a bias. Did you get matter?
I gotta hear that one more time.
Is it not called the People's Democratic Republic of North Korea? It doesn't make it democratic just because you give it a nice name. People sometimes say journalists shouldn't be biased. No, journalists should have a bias towards democracy. We should be.
Everyone has a bias. Everyone has a bias. If you are a person, you have a bias. If you are an entity that are made up of people, you have a bias. It's going to swing whichever way the majority of the people view things. There will always be a bias.
Be proudly pro-democracy and proud to call ourselves.
And you can be biased to be pro-democracy. Like you can do that, yes. As a group, you can do that if that is what you want to do.
Democrats. Small d Democrats.
Oof. He said small d Democrats. Now you can take that one of two ways. You're looking like some Bass Pro Shop swimmers over here, I guess.
Whew. Whew. It's been an absolute blast doing this live show on MSNBC for the past 3 years with an amazing team of producers behind me and with all of you watching at home. It's been a privilege. It's been a pleasure. But as we begin 2024 with an election coming, a war still ongoing, and too many Trump trials, honestly, to even keep track of, and with this show going away, I've decided that it's time for me to look for a new challenge. Tonight is not just my final episode of the Mehdi Hasan Show. It's my last day with MSNBC. Yes, I've decided to leave. To be clear, I am so proud, so proud of what we've achieved on this show, on this network. And I can't thank you all enough for tuning in and for your support and for your feedback. But as I say, new year, new plans. You can continue to follow me online at Mehdi Hasan on Instagram, on Threads, and of course Twitter or X, where I'll give you updates on what's coming next for me. For now, from me, for one last time on this network, good night.
Hey man, his hair still looks good. I'd say he's going places, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised if he pops up tomorrow somewhere, you know, with his own like Johnny News Network. Probably Johnny Harris Network is going to be more like it, I would assume. Yeah, that was good. Oh man, God, was that an hour? That was an hour of watching Mehdi Hasan. Yeah, I'm gonna say I had to pee. Probably that was the majority of it. Yeah, just checking out the threads. There's some pretty good movement here. I don't know how this is. A lot of people that don't follow me are checking out this thread. Like I said, I posted the link to that episode. It is here if you want to find it. You can follow me on Threads, Johnny_Soda. Otherwise, I will be posting this link. Or actually, I think I'm gonna clip from this stream because I feel like I knocked these points out earlier. So I'm gonna have to listen to myself, which is really annoying because I find my voice very mumbly. I don't know. Could be past childhood traumas. Anyway, moving on. Let's get the quick news. We'll check out this news and then hold on. Okay, so reorganize this. So this is the quick news. These two are related. I don't know if I'm gonna do Meet the Press. I think Meet the Press has been beaten down pretty good. I think this would be. Let's start with this. Yeah, let's start with that. Hezbollah is not looking good. Let's go there, and then we'll go there. All right, yeah, let's check this out. Is this important? Space Watch.
A private mission that blasted off from Cape Canaveral early this morning is facing almost certain failure after the critical loss of fuel to the moon lander after it separated from the rocket.
About 7 hours after the launch, the private company Astrobotic said it was having issues with a solar panel that had been used to power the aircraft. And there's also a propulsion failure, some kind of system failure there that
That's the border to Mexico. We cross the border every day. I don't think we're talking about the same thing. Anyway.
appeared to cause a loss of fuel.
So Derek Pitts joins us now. He is the chief astronomer at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Derek, thanks very much. So at this point, we've seen statements by this company. What exactly do we know right now?
Well, one thing we know for sure is that this is an extremely risky business. You know, it's always difficult to launch any spacecraft at any time, especially if you're sending something out to the moon. It's just really complicated. It's a really complicated business to be in. So what we know at this point is that there seems to be a flaw in the propulsion system such that if there isn't enough propulsion available, it might not be able to land safely on the surface of the moon. It might be able to make the trip out there, but it might not be able to land safely on the moon. So we have to wait and see what it looks like the available fuel is after the leak that has occurred.
You know, and Derek, it's been pointed out by the CEO of Astrobotic that the only successful lunar landings, there have been some crashes as well, have generally been accomplished by superpowers, right? China, maybe Russia, the U.S. for sure. So this partnership between the private company Astrobotic and NASA, there were high hopes that it would work out. So where did that dynamic...
Astrobotic, huh? All right, let me look something up while that's playing.
...fail? Because we've seen it work in other areas of private-public space exploration.
Yeah, and there's no question that it will eventually work out in this particular space as well. This is the first time around. I mean, you just think about the fact that this is the first time that Astrobotic has actually created a lander like this. It's a very complicated lander that has lots of different payloads on it. And the rocket itself, the Vulcan Centaur rocket, this was the first launch for Vulcan Centaur. That part went just fine, but this is the first for the Peregrine. So, you know, I think everybody realized that there was a chance that, you know, something might fail. And, you know, here it's manifested itself. But going forward, what will happen is they'll beat out whatever the bugs are and figure out how to make it work properly each and every time. If you look at what SpaceX has done, theirs has always been a process of iteration after iteration with a number of rockets.
Like, where do they get the money for that? Oh, gee, I wonder. NASA will pay Astrobotic $200 million to take the rover to the moon. They always make it seem like, you know, these companies are doing it out of their own good. SpaceX gets a huge chunk of money.
It's exploding on the path because before they became as successful as they are with launchings, with so many launchings happening with them successfully.
Derek, remind us what this mission was initially about. What was on board?
Well, what was on board the spacecraft were a number of instruments, scientific packages, and equipment for testing the environment and the atmosphere of the moon. NASA had five scientific experiments on board, and there were a number of other packages on board, such as a number of rovers from Carnegie Mellon University, and there were atmospheric testing packages, and there were also packages from a company called Celestis, of DNA residual, if you will, remnants of people who'd passed away, who, you know, expressed a desire, or their families expressed a desire for this to be their final journey to space. And so what you had were the DNA remains of people that were going to be landed on the surface of the moon. Very small packages, but all in all, there were 21 different packages and experiments on board that would be deployed at the moon or in the moon's atmosphere.
So, Derek, small sidetrack from the science of this to the DNA that you just mentioned. 330 people, the entire cast of Star Trek, JFK's DNA, and apparently hairs from the head of George Washington. What happens to what was going to be a permanent memorial, as they describe it, on the moon, to these vestiges of people past?
Well, it's a great question. If they don't make it to the moon, I mean, their ultimate destination might be to travel in space or to be in orbit around the Earth and the moon for a very, very, very long time. So, I think for an ultimate journey, if you don't get to the moon, but you get to travel in space forever, that's not so bad.
I don't think it's so bad at all.
Seems
I think it's actually a gorgeous way to put it. It's the truth, and it's lovely. And as you were talking about how difficult this is, I'm reminded we're used to seeing shots of the great celebration in sort of mission control when something goes well. That celebration is because the inverse also happens. Sometimes it doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's entirely true. And what we're used to remembering, what we always remember are the successes. We also remember the very hard failures. If lives are lost, that certainly stands out and always should guide, our work to try to drive risk in any of this to zero. But if we look back at every space program and every industrialized country all across the planet, every one of them has gone through that iteration period of the first, X number of rockets exploding on the pad, not making it to orbit, getting into orbit and then failing, getting to the location and then failing. I mean, if you look at the Russian space program, which is indeed very, very successful, they've never been able to get a spacecraft to Mars, and they have tried so many times, but they just can't get it together to make that happen. So, again, very risky, very, very complicated. I think we all miss how complicated this work is, but when you really get into it and think about it from the nuts and bolts aspect...
I mean, not the nerds.
It's amazing that any of these launches work as well as they do when they do. It is so complicated.
The moon is very, very far away. It looks so close sometimes on a clear night,
but
it
important
is
lessons
not.
will be learned from this.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, they will.
No question about that.
Yeah, I feel inspired just talking about it. Derek Pitts, I'm going to be updating my will. No more spreading the ashes in the Pacific Ocean. I want to be on an eternal voyage. Thank you very much.
Sounds like a great trip. Thank you.
In today's biased news,
here we go.
The final Epstein list is revealed. Netanyahu faces protests calling for new elections. And the Catholic Church will now allow the blessing of same-sex marriages.
I'm like, I don't know, the whole kiss thing on being married. And also getting married anyway. Anyway, on top of that.
Recently unsealed court documents related to the Jeffrey Epstein case have stirred controversy and fueled conspiracy theories about influential figures associated with the convicted sex offender, including former Presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. The filings offer a more in-depth look at the individuals in Epstein's circle and provide an insight into the scope of his abuse. Among the prominent figures mentioned in the documents are Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz, Bill Richardson, and George Mitchell. Other famous names mentioned include Michael Jackson and magician David Copperfield, neither of whom are accused.
Why is his head looks smaller than Hassan's, but his body it's got Hassan syndrome.
Of any wrongdoing. There's also modeling scout Jean-Luc Brunel, with whom the Epstein accuser says she was forced to have sexual relations. Additionally, and most surprisingly, the name of the late physicist Stephen Hawking appears in a 2015 email from Epstein to Maxwell, where Epstein suggests offering a reward to disprove an allegation that Hawking participated in an underage orgy in the Virgin Islands. It's important to note that Hawking has not been accused of any crime related to Epstein as of now, though the context of the email creates difficult questions about his activities. The unsealing of these documents has brought Epstein and his powerful friends back into the public consciousness, raising fresh questions about the scope of their crimes and the general lifestyles of the super wealthy and powerful. In a handful of Gaza updates, the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in central Gaza was partially evacuated due to increased Israeli military activity. Approximately 600 patients and medical staff were forced to leave. with their whereabouts unknown. Israel has signaled readiness to end bombardment in northern Gaza, claiming to have...
The barbarity, man, the barbarity of the audacity of these oppressors.
Dismantled Hamas there. However, they maintain that intense military operations are expected to continue in the rest of Gaza. The WHO canceled a mission to another hospital in northern Gaza for the 4th time, citing a lack of security guarantees by the Israeli army, who conveniently continue to refuse them. In the past 24 hours, Israeli attacks on Gaza have resulted in 73 Palestinians killed and 99 wounded. Notable casualties include the son of Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief and journalist Mustafa Thuraya. UNRWA has reported 142 of its employees killed since October 7th. Domestically, pressure is continuing to mount against the regime's prime minister and ruling fascist party. Protesters sat outside the Israeli Knesset demanding elections, showing a...
And that is another thing that is not being covered in today's media, is the amount of protests that are happening inside of Israel itself. Like the amount of people that are out there protesting against this fascist government every single day. And that gets zero coverage here.
Significant rise in dissatisfaction and mistrust of the apartheid regime due to the lackluster results of the war thus far.
We are united in these protests.
As well as the disregard for the lives of hostages.
But we are divided in the attention that they get.
This is evidenced by both the indiscriminate nature of the bombing in Gaza and the outright murder of 3 hostages waving a white flag while trying to escape. These protests, and members of the war cabinet boycotting their meetings due to recent divisions, come as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken plans a stop in Israel following his visits in Qatar and Jordan, with the latter expressing opposition to forced Palestinian displacement from Gaza. In today's lightning round, farmers in Germany are causing widespread disruptions by blocking roads with tractors in protest of the government's plans to eliminate tax breaks on diesel used in agriculture. The demonstrations, part of a week-long effort, oppose the government's move to address a budget shortfall by abolishing a car tax exemption for farming vehicles and reducing diesel tax breaks. Despite a partial government retreat, farmers insist on a complete reversal of the plans.
If only we could get the farmers as pissed off as they should be, because they've been screwed over for a very long time.
China has detained a foreign national, referred to as Huang, accusing them of spying on behalf of the UK's MI6 while heading an overseas consulting firm. The Ministry of State Security, or MSS, alleges that Huang, who started working with MI6 in 2015, provided intelligence and national secrets to the British. This development follows China's crackdown on international consulting firms. The MSS, traditionally low profile, has recently increased public communications, urging citizens to help combat foreign espionage.
5, 4, 3, we have ignition and liftoff.
The Vulcan rocket, a collaboration between Boeing and Lockheed Martin's United Launch Alliance, or ULA, successfully lifted off from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, carrying Astrobotic Technologies' lunar lander Peregrine. Astrobotic aims to achieve the first private company moon landing, with the spacecraft scheduled to touch down on February 23rd.
Okay, so that was a lot more informative than the bullshit that I just sat through for like 4 minutes of these motherfuckers not talking about anything, really. Like, you just told me Lockheed Martin, like, everything I needed to know.
The mission's objective is to gather data about the lunar surface in preparation for future human missions. If successful, Peregrine would mark the first U.S. soft landing on the moon since the last Apollo mission in 1972. And in positive news for the day, Pope Francis has approved a Vatican document allowing Roman Catholic priests to bless same-sex couples on a case-by-case basis. The document stresses not subjecting individuals to exhaustive moral analysis and not requiring prior moral perfection. While the blessings won't be part of regular church rituals or give the impression of an actual marriage, the move is considered a significant step towards inclusivity.
I want to know if you're going to be married in the eyes of the church, because if you're not married, because there is documentation for that, as someone who's been married, that you get documentation that the eyes of the church recognize this holy marriage. Now, is that recognized or not? Because it seems like it's not.
LGBTQ advocates view the decision hopefully, seeing it as a positive shift in the church's approach to queer individuals and allies. While the bar for the church is low, it's good to see them do the bare minimum occasionally.
Yeah.
That's all for today.
Can't agree.
We'll be back on Wednesday with more news. If you appreciate the work we're doing, consider becoming a patron to support the show. All patrons get early access to analysis episodes, as well as an audio version of the news. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
We do want to turn now to the other top story of the day. As the White House contends with the Israel-Hamas war and the risk of escalating tensions with Iran.
I didn't know this was part of Meet the Press, but let's go.
All as President Biden faces domestic pressure over his handling of the war. In a sign of renewed urgency facing the administration, Secretary of State Antony Blinken is set to leave today for his 4th trip to the region since the war began. Meanwhile, White House national security officials are meeting to discuss a potential U.S. military response to Iranian-backed attacks in the Red Sea. Houthi militants have launched 25 attacks on commercial ships since mid-November, including one today. The U.S. Navy has repeatedly shot down Houthi drones and missiles, and earlier this week sunk 3 Houthi boats in a dramatic confrontation, killing crew members. So on the table, according to 2 current administration officials, U.S. strikes on Houthi targets inside Yemen. Yesterday, the White House...
Okay, so she's going to, like, talk about how the U.S. has had success in killing the Houthi and their boats. All right, so this dumbass...
Nor do we want to see the war between Israel and Hamas widen in the region. But neither will we shrink from the task of defending ourselves, our interests, our partners, or the free flow of international commerce. It wasn't the United States who decided to attack commercial shipping in the Red Sea. The Houthis did that. And who are the Houthis?
Well played, sir. Well played. Well played.
Houthis backed by Iran, as I've...
Okay, yeah. You could reverse that role so easily, and it's, you know, somebody else's fault right away. What the hell? Oh, there we go.
Said before, Iran provided the missiles that the Houthis are using. We are simply in a defensive posture to try to protect that commercial shipping.
Now, this all comes amid concerns of escalation with other Iranian proxies, including Hezbollah, as a U.S. envoy is headed to Lebanon to try to diffuse tensions after an apparent Israeli strike killed a Hamas leader in Beirut. And then there's the fallout of a pair of deadly blasts in Iran yesterday that killed 85 and injured nearly 300. An ISIS-affiliated group is now claiming responsibility. Iran has tried to blame Israel and the United States, despite evidence suggesting neither country was involved. Meanwhile, the U.S. is pressuring Israel to do more to protect civilians inside Gaza. Today, the State Department saying Secretary Blinken is ready for difficult conversations with his counterparts.
We don't expect every conversation on this trip to be easy. There are obviously tough issues facing the region.
You are so bad at reading.
But the Secretary believes it is the responsibility of the United States of America to lead diplomatic efforts to tackle those challenges head on, and he is prepared to do that in the days to come. But we have been working very hard in this building, throughout the administration, and quietly with allies and partners in the region and throughout the world on what the day after ought to look like. Those are going to be some of the toughest conversations, of course, but we're ready to go pursue them.
Meanwhile, at home, the president faces pushback over his handling of the conflict as a senior education official resigned and campaign staffers signed an anonymous letter protesting his approach to the war. Joining me now is our team of reporters. Courtney Cubie is at the Pentagon. Ali Rafa is at the White House. And Josh Letterman is on the ground in Tel Aviv. And Court, I want to start with you and your exclusive reporting that the Biden administration is considering potential options for strikes against the Houthis. What do you make of these discussions? What are the key takeaways in the fact that this has risen to the White House level?
So it's indicative of the fact that this is getting the White House's attention. There's no question about that. And it's not just the threat to commercial shipping, which we have seen, as you mentioned, 25 attacks by Houthis into the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb in just over a month's time. Now, the U.S. set up this new maritime mission called Operation Prosperity Guardian. And we heard from the head of U.S. naval forces in the region, Vice Admiral Brad Cooper, earlier today. He said that since that task force was stood up on December 18th, even though there have been 1,500 merchant ships, commercial ships that have transited through that area, none of the Houthi attacks, including missiles and drones, have been successful. None have actually struck any of those ships. But Kristen, the attacks have continued, including the one today that you mentioned, which showed a new capability for the Houthis. They've used drones, anti-ship ballistic missiles, and cruise missiles, but this was actually a sea-based drone. So an unmanned drone that went, according to Brad Cooper,
you guys are like way behind the times. Why are there like 5 people on the squad?
This was someone who the U.S. is saying he was a member of one of these Iranian-backed groups, but the Iraqis have come out very hard to take. And you're
war. The concerns within the administration that there could be a wider war. What is the concern level at this point, particularly in the wake of yet another attack in Baghdad?
Yeah, and your lead-in just showed all. I mean, the fact that it is really it is all over the region right now. Baghdad is really interesting, though, Kristen, because this is one of the first times that we know of anywhere where the U.S. has taken a strike like this against an Iranian-backed militia member leader since Qasem Soleimani, which was almost exactly 4 years ago today. This was someone who the U.S. is saying he was a member of one of these Iranian-backed groups, but the Iraqis have come out very hard condemning this action. In fact, saying that these are the kinds of actions that terrorists would take and really condemning this strike. They are saying that, in fact, this individual was a part of what they call the Popular Mobilization Forces. So essentially under the arm, the broad umbrella of the Iraqi military. So this is a very controversial strike here today, Kristen.
All right, Courtney Kube covering all of the angles for us. Courtney, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.
Yeah, I think I'll just watch this.
On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Houthi are still attacking ships in and around the Red Sea.
My bad.
What impact is that having on global shipping? We're going to look at the Red Sea in 10 charts. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So a lot of people are asking me, what impact do these Houthi attacks have on me, the consumer, or the shipper of goods around the world? Well, we're going to take a look at 10 charts in 10 minutes. We're going to bang through these, give you all you need to know, quick and fast, with a lot of facts. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. All right, first, let's look at the number of attacks and where they're taking place. This is a chart put together by the European Union's Operation Atalanta. This is their anti-piracy patrol. However, they are also covering this region in terms of the Houthi attacks. On the left side here, you'll see the names of the ships all color-coded so that you can find them here in the Red Sea. This is Yemen. This is the region where you basically have it all the way from the northern region up here, border with Saudi Arabia, all the way down to the Bab el-Mandeb and Permin Island down here. This is where the Houthi are based. And then this chart breaks down the information even further by date, name of vessel, the ship's ID numbers, their flags, positions, and what type of attack took place. Not all these attacks took place in this region. There are some attacks off the coast of Somalia and up in the Arabian Sea. This chart from Marine Traffic shows you the world positions of all the major container ships on about 16 December to 25 December. These ships represent container ships over 8,000 TEU. TEU is a 20-foot equivalent unit. Basically, two 20-foot units equal an FEU. A 40-foot equivalent unit is about the size of the containers you see going up and down the roads. What's to notice on here is how the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandeb and the Gulf of Aden get absolutely deserted of vessels. This is because of those diversions being caused. Container ships are the ones being diverted because of their high value. Yep. That means the war risk insurance, the extra money you have to pay to insure these ships, is much more expensive. And so instead, the ships are heading from Asia to Europe via South Africa. What does that entail? Well, if you're heading from Asia to the east coast of the U.S., that's 6 extra days. That's 17% longer. If you're heading from Asia to Rotterdam, that's 10 days, that's 30% longer. And if you're heading into the Mediterranean to a port like Genoa, that is an extra 15 days or 57% longer, a substantial increase. Let's break this down by a few other metrics. This comes from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund's Port Watch. This chart specifically was compiled by Jim Bianco and his research company. This looks at the metric tons of trade transiting the Bab el-Mandeb, that narrow little strait at the bottom of the Red Sea that separates Yemen from the Horn of Africa, Djibouti, and Eritrea. You'll notice here that volume of trade has been increasing since 2018, when it was right around 4 million tons. Peaks up here on May 24th at 5.911 million tons. On November 27th, it was at 5.5 million tons. And then on January 2nd, plummeted down to 2.6 million tons. You may be asking about this other figure down here. This is March 31st of 2021. This is when Ever Given got stuck in the Suez and shut it down for 6 days. This is the number of ships transiting the Bab el-Mandeb on a 7-day average. You'll see on June 5th of 2023, it peaked with 56 ships going through the straits on a given day. On November 24th, it's down to 53 ships. And then on January 2nd, down to 28 ships. And we could expect to see that number fairly well stabilize now at right around that level, unless attacks increase and more ships of different types begin to divert, tankers, bulkers. But right now it's largely limited to container ships going through. This next chart shows you ships transiting through the Suez Canal. The Suez Canal is the very north end of the Red Sea. Each ship going through, on average, costs about $500,000 to go through. The Suez Canal usually sees about 17,000 ships a year go through. That generates a value of $9 billion for Egypt. Again, this big dip you see right here is Ever Given shutting everything down for a few days. But then what you see here is this fall from over 80 ships a day going through the canal. One of the big things that the Suez Canal did in 2015 was expand the canal so they can go from having 50 ships going through to 90 ships. They added a 2-lane section. That 2 lanes allowed more ships to go through. But you see here on January 4th, a drop down to 55 ships per day. You got to go back to literally almost 2020 to find less traffic going through. And the vast majority of that traffic is taking place here in this pink section. Those are cargo ships. Cargo ships are bulkers, dry cargo ships, roll-on, roll-off carriers, but this is being represented largely by the lack of container ships going through. You have a slight drop in tankers, but nothing significant at this point. Next chart shows rates. So how much is it costing to move your containers around the world? The Drewry World Container Index looks at this. And these are 4 rates that were taken as a snapshot of what is happening. So the Shanghai to Rotterdam rate has jumped from about $1,400 up to over $3,500. So we're seeing almost a 115% jump of that rate. Now, this percent jump is over the last week. When you look at the Shanghai to Los Angeles, which is not being affected at all by the Suez, but is being affected because of the transfer of vessels onto the longer route around Europe, and also because there's more demand now to get cargo onto the ships heading.
Some fucking liberal account just goddamn retweeted me. Come on, dude.
To the west coast of the United States. That has jumped 30% from a little bit over 2,000 to almost 2,700.
That's cool.
Shanghai to Genoa, this is that long diversion we talked about. It has jumped 114%. It's the highest one right now, just over 4,000. And then the Shanghai to New York is up 26%. What most people don't realize is that a lot of the containers that are going from Asia to Europe are transloaded and shipped over to the east coast of the United States. About a third of all the cargo on this route eventually winds up on the east coast of the United States. Let's expand that chart a little bit and look at where the rate compares to the supply chain prices. So back prior to 2020, you see the rates were fairly flat and even, very similar to what we see post-COVID here, where the rates kind of really stabilized out. The big hump you see here is the supply chain crisis, all the way from 2020 to 2022. And remember, during the supply chain crisis, the big issue we had was the fact that the world was demanding basically twice as many goods as before. Everybody shifted to home, and so our consumption changed. And the ocean carriers and shippers had to ship over goods for both a COVID economy and a pre-COVID or post-COVID economy. And so what we wound up with was excess goods coming in, a lot of cargo coming in that jammed up the ports and drove freight rates to this ridiculously high level where you see, for example, here on a Shanghai to Rotterdam route of over 15,000. Well, if you look right here, we're seeing that upward tick right here, very similar to what we saw at the beginning here in late 2020 when rates begin to climb precipitously. Do I think they're going to go up to the COVID levels? No, but definitely an uptick. How many ships are we specifically talking about? Again, over from Drury. This is their Far East to Northern Europe and back, 224 ships. If you look at the South Asia to Northern Europe and Med, 233 ships. The Far East to the Med, 131 ships. From South Asia to the East Coast of the United States or North America, 148 ships. And from the Far East to the East Coast of North America, 85 ships. This is 881 ships that are being impacted by having to sail around Suez. This means also issues with additional fuel cost. Ships are going to have to bunker in places like Durban and Cape Town, South Africa, where fuel is prohibitively more expensive and there's less of it. This means longer sea voyages, which means at least $500,000 extra in fuel costs. When you look at the amount of containers we're talking about 10 million containers are being routed around. This is a substantial amount of containers being moved around. Usually we have about 25 million containers afloat at any one time. So there's a lot of containers that are being shifted around at this time. Definitely a major change. Now, what's the reaction to this? What's been going on? Well, as you know, Operation Prosperity Guardian is going on. This is a map by Skits Intel. He updates this every day with the deployment of ships in and around this region. The Operation Prosperity Guardian is up and running. There are large naval forces present in the region, but a couple of things to note. We are seeing a diminishing number of U.S. ships. We've seen the pullback of the amphibious ready group. The Bataan group was moved out of the area into the Mediterranean. The Eisenhower battle group has shifted from the Gulf of Aden up into the Red Sea. This is so they can cover both the Red Sea, but also the Persian Gulf and potentially up in and around Israel with the withdrawal of the Ford battle group. We're seeing less surface vessels, destroyers in this region. You've seen the pullout of ships like Carney out of the area. Thomas Hudner went back up into the Med. Less vessels. We're hearing about more Allied vessels coming in, but some of them haven't arrived yet. And even some of these Allied vessels that have arrived are committed to their own independent operation. The Indians, for example, are operating independently. Korea, Japan, Spain, not operating within the banner of Operation Prosperity Guardian. And then, of course, you have some other forces at play here. The Chinese 45th Escort Group is down in the area. They have not done anything to assist at all in this. And then there was an erroneous report.
What do you mean they've done nothing?
Down in the area. They have not done anything to assist at all in this. And then there was an erroneous report about the arrival of an Iranian vessel in the Red Sea. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm saying the vessel has already been there for over a month.
Oh, what?
There's actually two vessels, a base ship and a frigate in the southern Red Sea, providing intelligence to the Houthi. So,
why? Nobody else has said that. Nobody else has said that.
10 slides in 10 minutes. I'm a little bit over. I apologize. I tried to bang it in there.
Sal, you're killing me here.
I hope this gave you a good snapshot about what's happening in and around the Red Sea with the attacks by the Houthis. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell to be alerted about new videos.
He like saved like the juiciest information for the very end. Oh my god, like dude, that woke me up. I was getting pretty tired, but now I kind of want to dive into
Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? You hit the super thanks button down below. You can contribute directly to the page or head on over to Patreon. You become a monthly, yearly subscriber, get access to videos early when I get them out, and also feel free to contact me for any questions you have.
Fantastic work
subscriber.
as usual.
So our next video is Sal.
I love this guy. I think he has a really good channel.
There are reports that a senior Hezbollah commander has been killed in an Israeli strike.
You guys need to calm down. That is what is going on with shipping. Excellent channel on YouTube to follow. Okay, so these guys are gonna try to give us some information. I'm sure it's gonna go well.
On southern Lebanon.
The timing is significant. It comes as cross-border violence on that border is threatening to escalate the war even further. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken heads to Israel.
Sorry, what war? What war? Hold on. Repeat that.
Threatening to escalate the war even further. Meanwhile,
Oh, you're not. Oh, okay. Oh, fine.
Kathleen Hicks. But at this point,
go back.
There are reports.
Significant. It comes as cross-border violence on that border is threatening to escalate the
what border?
War even further.
Oh my God, you guys are so ambiguous about everything. They're like, there might be a war going on a border somewhere. We don't know where.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Anthony Blinken heads to Israel after wrapping up 3 days of high-stakes talks with Arab leaders. Blinken is aiming to prevent the war from spreading into a wider conflict in that region. CBS News' Tina Kraus has more.
As Israeli troops fight Hamas militants in
what
central
are they
and southern
shooting
Gaza,
at? Dog, you're shooting at trees. Like, you're shooting at nothing. There is nobody there. Like, what are you shooting at? Like, really? Like, what is it? What did you see?
Israel released new video showing strikes against Hezbollah militants who've unleashed rockets into northern Israel from Lebanon. A high-level Hezbollah commander was killed on Monday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rallied his troops at the border, promising to do whatever it takes to restore Israel's security. As cross-border battles intensify, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East pushing for diplomacy.
This is a conflict that could easily metastasize, causing...
Yeah, words from this motherfucker mean nothing.
Even more insecurity and even more suffering.
He shuttled between...
Oh, they cut off the guy. This is such a one-sided affair. Like, this is like... Oh my God. I can't believe how one-sided this reporting is. You give no voice to this man that he's standing next to. You have him say nothing. These dumbasses over here, like over here shooting at shadows. They literally... Where is anybody? Where is anybody? There's nobody here. Guess what, dumbasses? They're in tunnels. They're underground. Like, they are not in front of you. Oh my God. We waste the most fucking ammo here. The most amount of money by giving these fucking Meal Team 6. Look at this fat bitch. Meal Team 6 looking motherfuckers. Can't even fucking climb up this 90 degree angle over here. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Funding these dumbasses. They got their little fucking hut on top of their fucking Merkava that's gonna get blown to bits by a goddamn Coke can filled with fucking C4. Like, dude, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Worthless ass
even more
expensive
insecurity
army.
and even more suffering.
He shuttled between capitals in the region, meeting with Arab leaders ahead of talks on Tuesday in Israel. In Gaza, there's pain for Palestinian civilians, trapped in escalating violence as Israel vows to destroy Hamas. An Israeli airstrike near Rafah over the weekend killed 2 journalists, including the son of Al Jazeera's chief Gaza correspondent.
Oh, so you can give that information that is very recent, but not like give a full update on like what Qatar said or like anything else.
3 months into the war,
This dumbass fucking worthless
heartbroken families of missing hostages left a long trail of empty shoes in Tel Aviv.
This is my shout to the world to bring them home.
More than 130 people, including Americans, are still believed to be held underground.
I'm surprised
Tina
they didn't start
Krause,
with that.
CBS News, London.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin remains.
What a just absolute like total shit show. So hold on, you know what? all right, dude. That's pretty dumb. God, all right. Let's go down the history loophole. Let's just look. I'm just gonna go back and look at what I was looking at earlier because that really like. It doesn't give enough information. It really doesn't. All right. I was watching some dumb stuff earlier too. Iron Fist still looks like absolute shit. Not interesting whatsoever. Houthi rebels. That's actually a good video. All right. So Qatar. Open a new tab. Did I not add this? I thought I added this to my playlists. Let's add the queue, dude. Alright. Alright, so here's the whole Blinken thing. That they did not show. For some odd
This is
reason.
a conflict that could easily metastasize, causing even more insecurity
yes.
and even more suffering.
That was Gaza, by the way. Qatar blames killing of Hamas DUI leader on high tensions. Yeah, whatever the fuck is happening there in Gaza. I'm sorry, the Qatar PM did what? I blame the killing of Hamas DUI leader on fresh escalation of war. This dumbass over here is saying this dumb shit. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just tired of it. I think it's a bunch of bullshit. So actually, regarding the negotiations for the hostages, it's been ongoing, right? Go through challenges, ups and downs. So the last time that they killed the Hamas leader, they called off any negotiations. So that was a major problem. Senior leaders, yep, there it is. Complicated the process. So now he's going to the UAE to, you know, go grab their dicks, I guess, for a while. Again, Qatar doesn't give a shit. UAE doesn't give a shit. Saudi Arabia doesn't give a shit. Like, they don't care about these guys. They're in bed with the United States. They're gonna do whatever the United States wants them to do. And if it's the other way around, the United States will bend over backwards to do anything and everything. Again, that is a lot of detail that you won't see in mainstream media. I think it's a major issue. I really don't care about that dude right now. Yeah, this was the other thing that I saw from HT. Yeah, it fell by 20%. So this lines up with what Sal was saying earlier. They're getting ships that are linked to Israel. They're not going to stop. They won't attack Red Sea ships if they're not linked to Israel, is what they're saying now. Previously, they were attacking any ship. I would assume that has something to do with the United States kind of pushing back. So there's still going to be issues. As long as they're not bound to Israel. This is 15 hours ago. Oh, no, wait. They're saying that they have been targeted. Okay. Yeah, so it looks like it's still on. They don't care. Leader, declare no connection to Israel to avoid being attacked. So, as long as you state that there is no issue going on here, every ship that goes through the Bab el-Mandab, the strait that connects, we have, as long as they broadcast the words, we have no relationship with it. I'm going to assume it's something a little bit more serious, like we have no alliance or allegiance to Israel or something like that. Simple, low-cost solution. That is pretty significant. Now, why didn't these assholes from this previous show just talk about this shit or like even mention anything about it? Because this was 15 hours ago. The other show was like within that time. So they should have received that same information. It's stupid. There's a bunch of just like bullshit that is being pushed. And it really kind of pisses me off. It really just like gets under my skin. Annoying kind of stuff. Alright. So yeah, that's really it. I would say we can watch a couple other things. Yeah. Oh, I meant to. This needs to be squished around. Yeah, let's see what's going on. So historically, speaking of the Houthi, they launched this missile probably about 2 months ago.
Yallah, ستة يا رب.
That's some crazy shit. It's all there. Absolutely insane. Making Elon a little jealous.
الموت لأمريكا، الموت لإسرائيل، اللعنة على اليهود، النصر للإسلام. لبيك يا غزة، لبيك يا أقصى، لبيك يا أقصى.
Making Jeffrey a little jealous. That went to space. Oh, technically space. That is how they popped off at the beginning of their declaration of war against Israel. Now, if you're not familiar with that, one thing I will say is that the Houthi are the first to go to space warfare. Now, if you type that in, on October 31st, during 2023 Hamas war, Israel war, they shot an Arrow 2 system. The Israel's Arrow 2 system intercepted the ballistic missile. So, they went into space, they shot it down from there. That is space warfare. Again, this is one of the more recent entries into space warfare. I'm going to say it was the first time that they actually started actual space warfare where they're fighting in space, basically shooting down the missiles. So that's pretty fucking nuts. That's pretty fucking crazy. Now you'll say, hey, well, you know, how do you stop something like that coming down from space? Well, you got something that's So these are all just like regular rockets, not like If it's being shot horizontally, then it's not something that we're talking about right now.
This is the Arrow third stage kill vehicle and is one of the most important part of the missile. Movable thrusters, it plays a crucial role in intercepting targets above the stratosphere, ensuring that hazardous materials like nuclear, chemical, or biological substances don't disperse. The Arrow missile system's radar continuously sends uplinks, updating the target's position and calculating the estimated interception point. Meanwhile, the kill vehicle dynamically adjusts its trajectory using precise thrust control, simultaneously aligning its electro-optical sensors toward the intended target, while the American THAAD and Patriot interceptors uses divert attitude control system. As the Patriot missile takes flight, it begins with inertial guidance launched from the engagement control station. But as it nears interception, it switches to the Ka-band seeker. The terminal guidance kicks in, using short propellant motors to explosively adjust the missile's path. This ensures a precise and on-target interception. So stay tuned and don't miss a beat. The Arrow missile defense system consists of 3 basic parts: the missile launcher unit, the Green Pine radar antenna, and the Arrow missile. The missile launcher unit is composed of 6 erector launcher tubes housing ready-to-fire missiles. Positioned at the rear of a 2-axle trailer, each launcher, when fully loaded with 6 launch tubes carrying ready-to-fire missiles.
So one thing I'll say is, like, these guys are so well-funded as far as a response to ballistic missiles.
Weighs 35 tons. The Green Pine radar serves as the warning and fire control radar for the Arrow 3 anti-ballistic air defense missile system. It plays a crucial role in target detection and guidance. The Arrow operates as a 2-stage missile. Let's look inside this engineering technology.
In space.
This is the solid propellant booster and sustainer rocket motors. At the rocket's peak sits the ignition chamber, triggering the combustion of the solid propellant when activated. This propellant isn't just any substance. It's a meticulously crafted blend of fuel and oxidizer poured into a casing and then cured. Encasing this blend is a protective shell called the motor case. At the core of the rocket lies the propellant burning zone. Here, the solid fuel and oxidizer react, producing incredibly high temperature combustion gases, which helps to launch the rocket at incredible speed above the Earth's surface. Moving further to the front, the most important part of the missile is the kill vehicle, which can be divided into 3 basic parts. The second stage is the propulsion system with a thrust vectoring nozzle. Just above it is the warhead, a directed high explosive fragmentation weighing 150 kilograms, which translates to 330 pounds. The third stage is the seeker, capable of pivoting itself to track its target.
Okay, it's crazy how it's 330 pounds and not 2,000 pounds like they have been dropping on houses in Gaza.
But what's the big deal about this long-range anti-ballistic missile system? Let's start with the propulsion system. The famous THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, uses a divert attitude control thrusters. In comparison to the Arrow 3 kill vehicle, which utilizes a thrust vectoring nozzle with a solid fuel rocket, it has a shorter and more limited burn time. It has a few advantages, one of them being the ability to compensate for a lack of radar accuracy. When the radar sends the interceptor to an inaccurate target location, the Arrow 3 kill vehicle can adjust its trajectory. Since intercontinental ballistic missiles travel at very high speeds, the kill vehicle must change its trajectory based on newer, more accurate radar data from its seeker. A failure to fully divert the course to the new target would result in a failure to intercept. The thrusters allow the Arrow missile to change direction very quickly and flexibly. On the other hand, THAAD uses divert attitude control systems. Although highly capable, it is not as flexible or fast enough when it needs to change directions.
Gotcha.
Furthermore, Arrow 3 thrusters allows for the purposeful launch of the interceptor before accurate radar data is available, knowing it can alter its trajectory later, taking full advantage of the radar's range. Moving to the sensors, THAAD depends on a wide field of view seeker and physically moves to keep the target in the seeker's field of view, which slows down the missile.
What are you going to do?
On the contrary, the Arrow 3 missile uses a pivoting seeker, capable of rotating on each side, thus allowing for extreme lead pursuits, flexibility, and engagement of threats. These steps outline a simplified version of how the system operates. Step 1. The Arrow weapon system, comprised of radar and launchers, continuously searches for targets in the expected direction. Step 2. Upon the firing of an intercontinental missile, it transmits a message to the Battle Management Center. The center processes this information, selecting the optimal interceptor and battery despite potential radar inaccuracies at long ranges. Step 3. The Arrow 3 launches vertically and then redirects toward the estimated interception point. Step 4. Before the booster motor burns out, an aerodynamic stabilizing mechanism deploys to ensure stability during this phase. Step 5. As the target approaches, the radar identifies the hostile warhead, initiating separation and revealing the kill vehicle. Step 6. The radar sends uplinks to update the new target position and estimated interception point. The kill vehicle adjusts its trajectory using highly dynamic thrust control while aligning its electro-optical sensors towards the target.
Jesus Christ.
Step 7. The final homing process commences, leading to a direct hit on the target, destroying the warhead. Step 8. In the event of evasion by one of the hostile warheads, the system engages in a reevaluation process, creating additional shooting opportunities for both Arrow 3 and 2 interceptors. What sets apart the Iron Dome interceptor from the Arrow missile defense system? They serve distinct purposes. The Iron Dome is relatively inexpensive, less complex, and primarily designed to neutralize artillery shells, unguided missiles, or inexpensive projectiles that pose a threat to civilian areas. On the other hand, the Arrow is considerably more advanced as an exo-atmospheric interceptor. Its primary function is to intercept ballistic missiles carrying conventional, chemical, biological, or even nuclear warheads. Additionally, it possesses the capability to destroy satellites. Let's take a closer look at how the Iron Dome missile defense system operates. The process begins with the radar detecting and tracking threats within a 100 kilometers radius. Subsequently, the data is transmitted from the radar to the Battle Management Control System, then to the launcher, and finally to the interceptor. The system analyzes the trajectory of potential threats and selectively intercepts those projected to fall within the protected area. Once a specific threat is identified, an interceptor missile is launched to eliminate the incoming rocket before it reaches its predicted impact zone. Equipped with an electro-optical sensor, the interceptor missile tracks and targets the incoming rockets, aiming to approach as close as possible to neutralize the threat. The design of the Iron Dome missile focuses on a head-on strike against its intended target. Upon reaching the designated target, the missile activates its advanced sensors and laser system. This activation triggers the proximity fuse warhead, armed with fragmentation rounds that detonate within a mere 10 meters of the target, causing maximum damage upon impact.
That's why it's a 95%
While the Patriot's missile uses
because
divert attitude control system. In the initial stages, the Patriot missile employs inertial guidance, specifically launched from the engagement control station. As it approaches the intercept point, the missile utilizes the Ka-band seeker to precisely track the target. An optimal aim point is chosen and terminal guidance is engaged. The short propellant motors explosively refine the missile's trajectory towards its target, ensuring accurate interception. This methodology aids the missile in reaching its trajectory and facilitates a hit-to-kill intercept of the target. The high-energy impact upon direct contact with the missile helps neutralize weapons of mass destruction. We make original 4K 3D animation with a small team of animators. So please support us by subscribing and dropping in a comment for more exclusive engineering animations made just for you guys.
I don't think I have anything else. I think I'm good. I think I'm good here. Oh God. All right. Yeah. I don't want to get into libertarianism right now. I think I'm gonna be good here. Let's minimize that. Oh yeah. Okay. So this one was a pretty good one. I might have watched this previously. But
Israel just launched a drone strike in Lebanon's capital city, Beirut, and assassinated a senior...
Speaking of the senior Hamas official being killed.
Hamas official. This is undoubtedly a major escalation that seems like it's intended to start a wider regional war. This is significant because if Israel launches a full-scale war in Lebanon, they'll be fighting against Hezbollah, the Lebanese political party whose armed wing is significantly larger and better armed than the Palestinian resistance fighters they're fighting in Gaza right now. This wouldn't be the first time Israel's attacked Lebanon either. They've invaded Lebanon twice, both times thinking they would walk away with easy victories, only to be absolutely humiliated, so much so that Lebanon has come to be known as Israel's Vietnam. Here's why. Israel's problems in Lebanon are largely of its own creation and go back to its founding. The state of Israel was conceived as a Jewish-only ethno-state set to be located in Palestine. The obvious problem with this concept being that Palestine was entirely Arab, making the only way to create a Jewish majority in Palestine to ethnically cleanse Palestine of its Arab population and to replace it with Jews from Europe. And this is exactly what they did. The State of Israel was quite literally founded through a years-long campaign of forced expulsion and mass murder, which resulted in 750,000 Palestinians having to flee their homes. Hundreds of thousands of these refugees fled to neighboring Arab countries like Jordan, Syria, Egypt, and of course, Lebanon. Israel launched the Six-Day War in 1967, forcing hundreds of thousands more to flee to neighboring countries. Naturally, these Palestinian refugees weren't just going to accept their own expulsion. Instead, they launched cross-border attacks to try to fight their way back into Palestine. By the 1970s, southern Lebanon became the epicenter of this border war. Historically, the prospect of Palestinians returning to Palestine was and continues to be one of Israel's most central fears. Because if all the Palestinians that Israel's expelled over the last 7 decades returned home, Israel would no longer have a Jewish majority, and it would cease to be a Jewish ethno-state. Israel invades Lebanon in 1982, claiming that it was acting in self-defense, but recently declassified Israeli documents reveal that Israel had already drawn up invasion plans over a year prior. Their goal was to permanently destroy the Palestinian resistance where they were concentrated and install a Christian fascist in power who was friendly to Israel. According to sworn testimony from a former U.S. ambassador to the UN, George Ball, Israel's long-term goal of destroying the Palestinian resistance in Lebanon was to eventually be able to take over the West Bank without opposition and leave only...
You know, you could like tie all of these videos together and have the longest like 24-hour education video about Lebanon, the West Bank, Gaza, Egypt, Jordan, everything that surrounds this place, and it still wouldn't be enough for the people that want to see dead bodies like the way it's happening today.
Quote, enough of them for work. Israel quickly surrounds Beirut and installs a leader from the Christian far-right party into the presidency. Palestinian fighters are being evacuated out of Beirut, and for a moment it seems like Israel's won. But a few weeks later, the president is assassinated. Seeking revenge, Israel commits one of its most heinous crimes in its history.
Yep, Sabra and Shadia.
Israeli forces surround the Sabra and Shatila refugee camp and allow gunmen from the Christian fascist Phalange party inside the camp to, quote, mop up the camp. Riding in on Israeli vehicles with Israeli weapons in hand, the Phalangists tortured, maimed, sexually abused, and executed what some estimate up to be 2,000 refugees in the Sabra and Shatila camp while Israeli soldiers stood guard outside. Meetings taking place in the lead up to the massacre show that Israel knew that the Phalangists were going to commit massacres and allowed them in the camp anyway. Israel's attempt to crush the Palestinian resistance through outright slaughter instead gave rise to new resistance groups. These resistance groups carried out bombings and ambushes, killing hundreds of Israeli soldiers. It was so bad that the US had to send Marines into Beirut to try to quell the situation, but the resistance defeated them too. One of the groups that was born out of the resistance to Israel at that moment was Hezbollah, or the Party of God, an Islamic resistance movement inspired...
If you can defeat the Marines, IDF doesn't have much of a chance.
By the success of the 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran. By 1985, Israel's occupation of Beirut became untenable, and they pulled their forces back to try to maintain a security zone in southern Lebanon. Their problem was that this happened to be Hezbollah's base of power, where the majority of Lebanon's Shia Muslim community was concentrated. Israel severely underestimated their enemy in the south. Israeli soldiers were fighting an enemy whose language they didn't speak, whose motives they never cared to understand, and who lived among and enjoyed the popular support of the people, meaning there was no indication to Israeli soldiers that a farmer or store owner smiling and waving at you wasn't relaying your location of fighters or plotting to kill you. Even though Israel had better weapons, the Lebanese militants didn't fight the Israelis head-to-head. They used their knowledge of the land to conduct hit-and-run ambushes and sabotage to level the playing field. Much like the Americans in Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan, Israel assumed that its superior firepower would grant it victory in Lebanon. But what all of these imperialist occupations fail to consider, however, is that killing people and occupying their land only makes them want to fight you more, not less. As Israel desperately poured more money and soldiers into the fight, casualties mounted, and Israel saw no signs of winning. Israeli public opinion began to turn against what was increasingly perceived as an endless stalemate, earning Lebanon the nickname Israel's Vietnam. In 2000, Israel finally surrendered, pulling their forces out under a hail of Lebanese gunfire, ending their 22-year occupation of all of southern Lebanon except for a small strip of farmland called Sheba Farms. This victory made Lebanon the first Arab country to decisively beat Israel militarily. But just 6 years later, Israel would invade Lebanon again, this time to destroy Hezbollah. The immediate cause of the war was that Hezbollah captured 4 Israeli soldiers with the intention of using them to negotiate for the release of Lebanese people imprisoned by Israel, much like Hamas's counteroffensive on October 7th. Israel responded by carpet bombing Lebanon, and much like the response following October 7th, stated that, quote, everything is a legitimate target, not just southern Lebanon, not just the line of Hezbollah.
Very similar.
A former Israeli army commander explained that Israel's strategy was to indiscriminately bomb Lebanon, to drive a rift between the Lebanese people and Hezbollah. In his words, if you want your air conditioning to work, you must take action towards shutting down Hezbollah land. The strategy of using overwhelming force to intentionally destroy civilian infrastructure became a formal Israeli military doctrine, which they called the Dahiyah Doctrine, named after the neighborhood Hezbollah was headquartered in 2006, in the same neighborhood where Israel carried out its drone strike this week. This doctrine guides Israel's current strategy in Gaza today. Bomb everything, make no distinction between civilian and military, and hope people blame the other guy. Again, however, Israel completely underestimated their enemy in 2006. Israel sent in dozens of their most advanced Merkava tanks, dubbed God's chariots, thinking Hezbollah would have no counter for them. Hezbollah, however, created a sophisticated tunnel network that they would pop out of, fire anti-tank guided missiles from, only to then disappear back into the tunnel system, much like what we're seeing in Gaza today. Israel even tried shelling Lebanon by positioning a warship off its coast, only for Hezbollah to severely damage the ship with a Chinese-made anti-ship missile, forcing it to retreat. The turning point of the war was Israel's attack on Bint Jbeil, a town in southern Lebanon that served as the heart of Hezbollah's resistance against Israel's first occupation, and the town Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah gave a victory speech in after the Israeli withdrawal. Israel announced that it had complete control of Bint Jbeil, only for that narrative to completely fall apart when it became clear that that wasn't true. Hezbollah was able to fend off 3 Israeli attempts at taking the city, despite being outnumbered in their estimates up to 10 or 20 to 1. Israel received its decisive blow at the Battle of Wadi Saluki, where a, quote, few Hezbollah fighters defeated an entire Israeli tank brigade, knocking out over 20 Israeli tanks and even shooting down an Israeli helicopter. Wow. Israel withdrew from Lebanon soon after the battle, which has been described as one of the most humiliating operations in the history of the IDF. The supreme arrogance of the imperialists has always been that they begin to believe their own propaganda. Israel's gotten so used to slandering the Palestinian and Lebanese resistance as terrorists, as barbarians, as savages motivated by religious extremism that they seem to have forgotten who they're fighting. They're fighting the descendants of the Nakba. They're fighting the survivors of Sabra and Shatila. They're fighting the now grown-up children of Bint Jbeil. In other words, they're fighting the historical memory of their own crimes personified. Israel thinks that bombing Dahiyah in 2024 will be different than bombing Dahiyah in 2006, which they thought would be different from bombing Dahiyah in 1982. So while it's unclear where things will go from here, one way or another, Israel's going to learn that it was never about the size of the bombs they dropped. No bomb was ever going to convince the Lebanese or Palestinian people that they couldn't be free.
Wow. That was very amazing. I don't know that we have, I think I've previously watched this on stream. Amazing video. I definitely will clip from that. I think I'm going to put that on the old threads and see what happens. It is late. I am tired. So I will say deuces. I guess to go. I gotta sleep. Me tired. Thank you. Thank you anybody that came out, anybody that watches this later. I hope you have a good day.